Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to inspire and motivate people to never give up on themselves or their dreams. We will chat with highly successful people from all walks of life and discuss what motivates and drives them to successfully attack life head on and never give up.
Welcome to episode number 60 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is positivity. Our quote of the day comes to us from Winston Churchill. The positive thinker sees the invisible, feels the intangible, and achieves the impossible. I believe you will really enjoy today's episode. Our guest is an incredible woman filled with positivity. When it comes to wanting to make a difference in other people's lives, she clearly gets it. As a successful blogger, author, and extremely creative individual, she is always working on something great. It is my pleasure to introduce my friend, Dani Dipirro. So Dani, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate you being here. So the first question we ask everybody is, are you ready to make it happen?
Of course I am.
I knew you'd say that. So the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire people to never give up on themselves or their dreams. And I was curious if you have either a story about perseverance or perhaps a challenging time that tested you, but you kept on going and didn't quit.
Yeah, I think when I first started my website, Positively Present was probably one of the best, but also one of the most challenging times in my life. I was really sort of disheartened with where I was in my life. I really wasn't enjoying my career. I wasn't in a good relationship. I wasn't in a good relationship with myself. And I was just really struggling. And for a long time, I'd been struggling and sort of going through, as a lot of people do, I think, a little bit of ups and downs. Like generally, I would say I was struggling, but then there'd be, something good would happen. So I'd kind of just ignore the whole struggle that I was going through and just keep going. And I think it would have been easier, and it often is easier for a lot of people to, even when the path you're on is difficult or you're not enjoying it or you don't feel like, oh, this is what I should be doing, you kind of stay on it for a while because it is really difficult to change. And especially to do something like starting your own business or, quitting your job, doing things that aren't necessarily the norm, although I do think those things are becoming more the norm. But, I think people struggle with change, and I know I personally do. It's still not my favorite thing in the world, but so for a long time I was not loving my career, and I knew, I wanted to do something else. I knew my whole life I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to create things, and I wasn't really getting that out of my career. And it was definitely a struggle because, financially I needed to have a job and have a steady income, as most of us do. So I was kind of in a tough spot. What do I do? And I realized that if I wanted to do my own thing and I wanted to go on the path that felt right for me, first of all, I had to find that path. Positively Present came completely almost out of nowhere. I was just doing some online research of how to make my life better, how to be happier. And as I was doing that, I started to realize that it wasn't really happiness that I wanted. It was, in fact, more positivity and a better attitude. Because happiness, I discovered, and most people probably know, is a very fleeting thing. Like even if the most amazing thing happens to you, that great feeling doesn't last forever. Whereas having a positive attitude, being more mindful, those things are things that you have to learn. They're skills, but they always stay with you. So you can have the worst day and still be positive. You can have the best day and still be positive. So it was really just an online search of trying to figure out what the heck was going on with my life and how I was going to take my career to where I wanted it to go. So first it was finding sort of that purpose, which started in the form of a blog. And after that, it took the dedication of, saving money and making different choices in my life to actually make it a reality. And I think a lot of people struggle with that because it's hard. I mean, if you want to save money to leave your full-time job, you have to save a lot of money and you have to make a lot of changes in your life. And I think getting to the point where you even realize that you can do that, because so many people think to themselves, oh, I could never do that, or I can't afford that, or, and it's a lot of a mindset shift to get to the point where you're like, what are you valuing, and what do you want to prioritize to make things happen for you? And so that's sort of where it all started for me, was coming to the realization that I wanted something different. And then, more importantly, realizing that I could make it happen. It was going to be hard, and it definitely was, but it was something that was within my control, which, wasn't always something I believed, I guess.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. That's quite an interesting backstory as far as how everything came about. And I need to tell you, your book, The Positively Present Guide to Life, I thought, just from the cover, it looked interesting for me. It's something that we talk about at No Quit Living all the time, is positivity. And our logo for our company is No Quit Living, and then 3 words underneath it are positivity, persistence, and prosperity. So for me, it stood out as far as what we really talk about. And I think you mentioned something that I really wanted to just touch on really quickly is happiness does come and go, but positivity and a positive attitude and a positive mindset is something that you have control over. And the other thing that we found is that it's really important to surround yourself with positive people that support you. And I think a lot of times starting a business or being an entrepreneur, just all different facets of life, is if you don't have those positive people in your corner that really and truly support you, it makes whatever you're doing that much more difficult. So I wanted to ask you, how did you go about writing this book? Because I have to tell you, I read a ton of books, and what I do is I underline, I highlight, and I fold over certain pages. I'm looking at the book right now, and I have to tell you there's probably 60 or 70 pages that are either highlighted, underlined, and or having the corners folded down to come back to. So I just have to, first of all, commend you for writing such an important book in so many facets of life. But biggest question I would ask you is, what came from an idea to actually writing the book? Because I think so many people have a book inside them, but ultimately they never end up doing it.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, I think everybody has something to say. I think one of the key things is that I've always wanted to be a writer. I think not everybody wants to do that. They might have great ideas or great stories or whatever, but some people don't like writing, and that's totally fine. But for me, obviously, I had a blog already, so I was writing all the time. And then when the publisher came to me and asked if I wanted to write a book, they basically said, "What do you want to write about?" So to me, it was really initially thinking, okay, what's the most important thing to get across? And what I wanted to do is I wanted to sort of touch on a variety of facets of life and sort of how you could take what I've learned about being positive and staying present and incorporate that into your career, into your life at home, into romantic relationships, friendship, and also into sort of going back to what I said before, into the topic of change, because I struggle so much personally with change, and I know a lot of people do. And whether you're making a change yourself or a change is sort of just happening to you, like you get fired or you lose someone that you love, or, changes happen in life, and, how to cope with that and how to stay positive. So that was sort of my overarching thing, was let's focus on these areas and then dive deeper in each one and sort of explore what I've discovered works for me. And an important thing to note is that when I started Positively Present, it's not because I feel like, oh, I have great insights about being a positive person that I want to share with other people. It started because I'm a very negative person by nature. I tend to find everything that's going to go wrong. And I think that part of that's human nature. I think, it's instinct to, try to predict what could go awry so that you can avoid it and not, encounter pain or, anything bad happening to you. So I think it's somewhat normal, but it's also, there's sort of levels. And I think I definitely skew towards the being too negative. And then another thing that I do, and a lot of people do this as well, is I spend a lot of time thinking about the future and worrying about what's in the past. Two things that are not very productive, because with the past, you can't undo what's happened. And with the future, you don't necessarily know what's going to happen. I mean, there is a level of preparation and, anticipation for what's to come. But when you spend too much time in either of those places, in the past or the future, you're kind of missing out on life. And that's why I started Positively Present, is not because I was some expert who knew answers that I wanted to share. It was because I was struggling with these two things, staying positive and staying present. And I wanted to sort of explore how me, as, a negative, sort of worrying, anxious person, was going to figure out how to embrace these two things in my life. And so the Positively Present Guide to Life is what I've found so far that works for me, for somebody who is not intuitively positive, because I think a lot of people, luckily are that way. They tend to see the best in things. They, can be really present in the moment. And that's what I aspire to, but that's not something that comes easily to me. So my goal with both the book and the blog is to help people who maybe don't think that stuff comes naturally to them, or they say, oh, like being positive is, silly or naive, or, I've got too much to worry about. I can't, be present every second. Those types of people are my type of people, because I, relate to that. I very much struggle. And even now, I mean, I've been doing this for so long, but I still struggle with being positive and being present sometimes. And I think we all do. So, when I wrote the book, I was just really hopeful that my tips would help other people, because that's one of the ways I learn a lot of things. And I'm sure you do the same, is, learning from what other people have done and seeing if it works for you. Not everything does, and that's totally fine. But when you do find those things that somebody else has gone through and told their story, you're like, wow, I can really learn from that, or that really applies to me. It's amazing, because then you don't always have to do all the hard work yourself.
No, I agree. And I think people are tend to find themselves either a positive person, or maybe they look not so much on the bright side of things. But I think being more positive and having a more positive outlook on life is something that anybody can learn. It's not simple and easy where it'll take you 5 or 10 minutes. But one of the things that I've tried to do over the last couple of years is spend more time with people that are more positive, and not to the point where you give everybody 5 minutes and then you dismiss them. But in today's day and age, there's so much negativity going out there, and I think it's important to really surround yourself with positive people that will help you to get to whatever level of success you want to get to in life. So I'm glad you mentioned that, and I really appreciate the feedback on how your book came about, as well as your website, because I do think it's a very interesting story, which I didn't know fully about before you said it. So thank you for sharing that with us. One of the things we utilize in each of our shows is a daily quote. I was curious if you have a favorite quote.
Well, that's kind of a hard one for me, because I love quotes, love them. There's something so amazing about how, like, a single sentence or phrase can, transform how you think about things. Or a lot of times for me, what I find most interesting is not that I necessarily see a quote that I've never seen before, because a lot of times you'll see similar quotes or the same kind of concept, but sometimes it just hits you, at that point in your life, where you're like, wow, I've heard somebody say, like, even like as simple as stay positive. Like, I've probably heard that since the day I was born. And, but it just at some point resonated with me. And I was like, oh, wow, that actually is a good thing to do. And it does make a difference. Rather, than before I would just kind of brush it off and be like, oh, whatever, stay positive. I can't do that. So to pick one quote that would be like my all time, I don't think I could even begin to start there. But there is a quote that I just read yesterday. It's not the first time that I've heard it, but for some reason it just really hit me. And so I'll share it with you, because maybe it will, help you or somebody that's listening. But it's an Albert Einstein quote, and it's, "You never fail until you stop trying." And I think it's not a new concept or by any means something crazy that people haven't said before, but it is interesting to think about the idea of when you get to that point where you feel like you might want to give up on something, or you're not really, getting the results immediately that you want. Like, a lot of people will give up, and sometimes it's good to give up. I won't say, you should pursue everything forever, because, some things aren't meant to happen. They're not going to work out. But I do think that it's such an interesting thing to think about. Like, what if you didn't give up? What if, it's really hard right now and you can't quite get it right at this moment, but you're determined not to give up. And I think it kind of goes with the message that you try to share with people about persistence, and sticking with things. It's a kind of cliche thing to say, but I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of successful people succeed. And, I'm not the first to say this, but it's not because they had the best thing or that the absolute best at everything. It's more often than not because they didn't give up. And some people face more trials and more hardships than others, and are in different situations where, you might not be able to keep going at a certain thing for whatever reason. But I think there really is something to be said with the whole notion that where there's a will, there's a way. If you really, really want something and you're willing to make that your priority, you can find a way. It might take longer than you thought. It might sort of go down a different path than you thought. But I think it's possible. And sort of reading that quote yesterday, it's not the craziest, coolest quote or anything, but it just got me because I was like, you know what? Like, there's something I'm working on right now. It's really been hard. I've said that it was going to be done this summer. It's not done. It's not even close to being done. And part of me is like, maybe it's not the thing that I should be working on right now. And then I read that and I was like, you know what? I got to keep going. I got to finish this out, see how it goes, and at least you give it your all. Doesn't mean it's guaranteed to work, but then you at least know you did it. Because I've had that with some products and different things I've done. I've, gotten super excited and done all this stuff, and then nobody was really that into it. And then I'm like, okay, well, that didn't work. Move on. And that's definitely something I've learned about, having a more positive attitude in life and being more mindful is, not getting too caught up in what doesn't work, and sort of learning to just move on, which is a really, really long answer to your one question about my quote. But I had a lot to say about the quote question, I guess.
Well, I need full and fair disclosure. I love quotes myself, so we maybe will connect offline and we probably could share quotes for hours and hours. But
yeah,
that Albert Einstein quote is one of my favorite quotes. And something you touched on was really interesting, and I just want to mention it real quick, is you said how sometimes a quote will hit you and it'll just have an impact. And that's why No Quit Living was named No Quit Living. Is I came across a quote a few years ago by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. It's always too early to quit. And I don't know what it was, but that quote just literally stuck out to me. And ultimately, a little bit while down the road, No Quit Living was formed. And probably 4 months ago, I think I subscribed to 5 or 6 different daily quote emails. And a quote came across probably, I'd say 4 months ago now, actually. It was by Elbert Hubbard, is positive anything is better than negative nothing. And I don't know what it was, whether it was a tough day with my kids or something or work, but the reality was it just hit me. And one of the things we often discuss on our show with a lot of our guests is why certain people are successful and others are not. And the common theme comes down to giving up. And I think the reason people give up is because things get hard. And it takes a really strong person to be able to say, you know what? It's really easy to give up. It's gonna be the simple thing. It's not going to require any work. But so many people are not willing to put in the time and the effort, whether that's with a relationship or a business or a marriage or a friendship or just possibly starting a business. And I think you touched on some really good things. And yes, it was maybe a long answer, but it did have a lot in it. But I appreciate you sharing that, because the easy thing and the simple thing is to give up. The easy thing and the simple thing is just to throw in the towel and say, yeah, maybe some other time, or this is not the business or the relationship, I'm just going to give up. But the hard thing is to really dig deep and say, you know what, this is something I believe in, or this is a relationship that I really want to work, or a company or a business I want to start. Even though I'm going to get knocked down a couple times, I'm going to get back up. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, no problem. And I think, people need to also remember that, I could be wrong, but almost everybody who's started anything or done anything, whether it's a book, whether it's business, whatever, everybody gets knocked down or has bad days or things don't go as planned. I mean, that's just the way it goes. I don't know anybody who started a project and been like, oh, that was so easy. It went perfectly. Nothing went wrong. Every idea was exactly as I envisioned. Like, that's just not how it is. And so you kind of have to go into it knowing things are going to go wrong. Things aren't going to be as perfect as you want them to be, and that's okay, because sometimes it's those imperfections and those sort of twists in the road that take you different places than you thought you would go. And it really is helpful to be open to that, instead of being like, "Ooh, this is not right, and I don't like this," and instead of being like, "Well, maybe this could work or could go a different way or whatever." Just sort of having an open mind really helps too, no matter what you're doing.
No, and it reminds me of something else that we talk about quite often, and we do some video challenges both on our YouTube page as well as our Facebook page. And one of the things that's been a common theme for the last 2 or 3 months is that all throughout life, people are going to quit on you. But the important thing is you don't quit on yourself, because you can't control whether someone gives up on you or gives up on a business or a relationship, but you can control whether you give up on yourself. And I just want to empower our listeners, whether it's business, relationship, personal, family, just don't quit on yourself. And if you truly believe in something, keep going. And especially like you mentioned, you're going to get knocked down, but just get back up and keep going. So here's a tough question. If you had to define yourself within one word, what would that word be?
That is a tough question, but a good one. I think it would have to be something with creating. Maybe it's creative, maybe it's creator, because I think at the heart of kind of who I am, I like making things. I like writing words. I like drawing. I like the whole idea of taking something that's in my brain, an idea, and putting it out in the world. And I wish there was a way to say like inspiring creator in one word, because that does kind of get to the heart of what all the work I do. And I want to inspire other people and inspire myself. I mean, a lot of what I make, whether it's writing, or whether it's drawing, on my Instagram, I do a lot of kind of combining the two, writing and drawing. And it's all, stuff that I'm going through or a quote that inspires me at that time. So, it's very personal. When I'm creating stuff, obviously, I really want to inspire other people as well and help other people. But it's definitely, something that has inspired me whenever I make something or that's made me think differently. So I would say creative would be it.
We'll allow you to put those 2 words today. So inspiring creator. No, I appreciate you sharing that. And here's a different question. If you could go back and give the 20-year-old version of yourself one piece of advice, what would that be?
I think the piece of advice I would give myself would be to get started sooner on sort of tapping into my creativity as a career. I think when I came, at that age, I actually was in college still, but I didn't really, I knew I wanted to be a writer, but I thought I had to sort of go into some sort of traditional path. Like I thought about being a journalist, writing magazine articles, being an editor, sort of those standard paths. And at that time, to be honest, if there were bloggers, there were very few. It wasn't, the opportunities that we have today where you can pretty much go online and be whatever you want to be. So it was a little bit of a different time, but I would say, to explore more also with drawing and art. I had taken a couple drawing classes in college, and I knew that I liked art and being creative in that way, but I always thought I'm a writer. And that's why when you asked that last question, I think probably back then that would have been what I would have said, something about more writing rather than the broader scope of being creative through various things. And I think that happens with a lot of people, and particularly creative people. You kind of decide, oh, I'm a sculptor, or I'm a writer, or I'm a this, or I'm a that. And I think not limiting yourself. So I think the advice would be don't limit yourself, try new things, and don't feel like you have to be the, I guess, epitome of that thing. Because when I think of an artist, I think of like somebody who can paint amazing things, or like I said, sculpt something, or these kind of very high level artists. And I think I held myself back in some of that stuff, thinking that I wasn't, I guess, super good at art, but art is subjective, and you can make things that impact people just by being yourself and doing whatever it is you like to do or feel you're good at, even if it's not the traditional way of going about it. So yeah, I would just say, if I could tell my old self one thing, it would just be to be open-minded and not limit yourself into what you can be or think you should be.
I like that. If you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
That's a great question. I think the first person that came to mind, I guess, is just going to be the person I say. This is kind of like the quote question. I could spend forever researching and thinking, but I think there's something to be said about who first came to your mind. And the first person that came to my mind was Maya Angelou. She's such a wise person, and everything that I've ever read of hers has made me think differently and made me want to be a kinder, more compassionate person. Plus, her demeanor just seemed calm. And I know you can't really tell unless you meet somebody, but you kind of just get a calm. When you look at like a photo of her or something, it just makes you feel calm. And that's sort of something I would aspire to in my own life, and something I don't think I've yet come close to, is sort of that sense of peace. Like I'm not a very calm person. I'm usually kind of excited. I'm a very extreme person, very excited or very not excited. So something about her work has always really spoken to me. So I think the important thing about that question for anybody who's listening is consider who came to your mind first. Because a lot of times when people listen, they answer the question in their own head who they would say. And I think it's interesting because I wouldn't have actually expected her to come to mind. So now I'm going to go read up on her even more and see if there's some reason she immediately jumped to mind when you asked that.
No, and that's the fun part about some of these questions is some of them are scripted in the sense of going through the flow of the interview, and some of them obviously are not. So I'm glad you shared that with us. And you are the first person that said Maya Angelou, so I'm glad that you mentioned that, because there have been quite a few people that have been repeats. So it's always interesting to get people's perspectives. So I wanted to ask you if there's anything you're working on or anything you're releasing soon that you'd like to share with our listeners.
Yeah, every year I have a diary or a planner that comes out, and it's out now, and it's called Everyday Matters, and it is something I work on each year, all year long, and so I'm so excited when it comes out. I illustrate it and write in it. Each month has a different theme, so it's just a planner you can use on your desk, or there's also a pocket size if people like to take it with them. And I know a lot of people keep stuff on their phones and on their computers in terms of their schedule. So it kind of depends if you're the type of person that wants a planner, but I actually use it as a gratitude journal, and all the spots where you could write down your to-do lists or your appointments or whatever I use for gratitude. And this is the first year that I've done that, and it's been amazing because there are a lot of lines on each day, and it really makes you think about all the little things that I'm thankful for. So that's personally how I use it. But for anybody who's looking for a planner, a gratitude journal, just something to keep notes in, definitely something to check out. You can find it at local bookstores, on Amazon, anywhere that you would buy books or planners. And it's the Everyday Matters Planner for 2018. And I'm actually currently working on 2019, which is crazy because that seems so far away.
Well, we will definitely have to touch base offline, because we are actually working on the design right now for a No Quit Living accountability planner. So
awesome.
I definitely want to pick your brain a little bit on that. So wanted to ask you if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
I think if I could leave any parting words, it would be to, in your relationships or in your career, even with yourself, keep an open mind, because you really don't know what's going to happen. And I think so much of our limitations in life are created by ourselves. And they don't always seem that way. Sometimes it seems like, oh, well, I can't do this because of that or this or that. But if you really dig deeper and you say, well, could I actually do that? And sometimes it helps to have somebody else chat through things with you because other people will have fresh perspectives. But I think keep an open mind and don't, like you said before, don't give up on yourself. Like, there will be people that will want to put you down. There will be situations that will be terrible. Life is hard. It's hard for everybody, whether you're the most privileged person, whether you're living in the worst place in the world, in the worst situation. It's a tough go for all of us. But I think don't give up on yourself and what feels right to you. I think there's something that you can kind of tell when something feels good. So pay attention to that and keep an open mind, because sometimes, things that you didn't think were you, or, I mean, if somebody told my teenage self that I would be writing about positivity and, helping people, I would have been like, are you kidding me? Like, I am so negative. My nickname when I was a kid was Eeyore because I was always gloomy. Like, I would never have believed it. And here I am. So, anything is possible. It sounds cheesy, but it's true. And the only way for that to actually happen is if you keep an open mind and don't give up on yourself.
I love that, Eeyore. I mean, Dani. Last question for you, and I promise it's the easiest one. What's the best way for our listeners to either connect with you or follow you?
The best way is on positivelypresent.com. And right at the top of the site, you'll find all my social media avenues that you can connect with me, because I know, certain people are partial to certain things. I personally am very partial to Instagram, so that's where you'll find me being the most active, and I'm positively present on there as well. But if you want to read my blog posts, if you want to find out how to buy my books and everything, all of that's on positivelypresent.com.
That's awesome. Listen, I can't thank you enough, not only for your time, but also for your insight you shared with us. And again, the book, The Positively Present Guide to Life, I would highly recommend to people from all walks of life, whether you're young, old, entrepreneur, or not. It's great for personal, business, relationship. There's just so much great advice in there. So I truly appreciate you being with us, and I look forward to hopefully talking to you soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
To sum up today's episode and our theme of the day, positivity, Dani is paying it forward through her work. Since 2009, when she launched her website, she has been doing incredible things. One thing she mentioned, which I happen to believe fully, is so important, but sometimes it is hard to do. Dani mentioned how having a positive attitude is something that we can all control. In her closing remarks, Dani mentioned the importance of keeping an open mind in relationships, your career, as well as within yourself. She also mentioned that anything is possible and not to give up on yourself or others. Today's call to action is very simple. It might not be easy, but conceptually it is simple. No matter what life throws at you, remain positive. It could be traffic, a fight with a spouse or a friend, or just a bad day. Whatever it is, face it with positivity and remain as positive as you can. Smile, take a breath, and go for your greatness.
And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.